that documented 2 years of harassment, threats, and emotional abuse. At just 28 years old, she had recently given birth to her first child, a beautiful baby girl named Emma Grace. It should have been the happiest time of her life. Instead, there she was, in my court, forced to defend her basic right to name her own child. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands trembled as she organized her papers, and the exhaustion of new motherhood combined with legal stress was written all over her face. This was a young woman pushed to her absolute breaking point by the person who was supposed to love and support her unconditionally. The baby's name, Emma Grace, had deep personal meaning. Emma was the name of Jennifer's husband's late sister, who had died tragically in a car accident 5 years earlier. Grace was Jennifer's middle name, a way to honor both sides of the family and create something meaningful and beautiful. When Jennifer and her husband chose this name, they did so with love, intention, and respect for their family history. It was their decision as parents, made together with careful thought and emotional significance. But Barbara Henderson, she had a different vision entirely. From the moment Jennifer announced her pregnancy, Barbara assumed, without question, that the baby would be named Barbara Rose Henderson Jr. She never asked, she never discussed it. She simply decided that this baby would be her namesake, and everyone else would fall in line with her demands. Barbara had gone so far as to order personalized baby blankets, clothing, and nursery decorations, all embroidered with her own name. She spent over $2,000 on items that announced this child as her personal legacy. She told friends, family members, neighbors, and anyone who would listen, that her namesake was on the way. She created an entire narrative in which this baby existed primarily to honor her. When Jennifer finally told her mother the name they had chosen, Barbara's reaction, nothing short of nuclear. She screamed at Jennifer over the phone, calling her ungrateful, selfish, and disrespectful. She showed up at Jennifer's house uninvited and berated her for hours about family obligations and respect for elders. When Jennifer tried to explain the meaningful reasons behind choosing Emma Grace, Barbara refused to listen. She didn't care about the deceased sister. She didn't care about Jennifer's feelings or her husband's grief. She cared only about what she wanted, what she demanded, what she believed she was entitled to receive. The harassment escalated rapidly after Emma was born. Barbara refused to visit the hospital. She refused to meet her granddaughter. She sent dozens of text messages and emails demanding that Jennifer change the birth certificate immediately. She called Jennifer a failure as a daughter and claimed that this decision had caused her severe emotional distress and public humiliation. She told family members that Jennifer had betrayed her and turned relatives against each other with her manipulation and lies. And then, 3 months after Emma's birth, Barbara did something that shocked even her own family members. She filed an actual lawsuit, claiming $50,000 in damages for emotional distress and breach of implied family contract. I'd seen thousands of frivolous lawsuits during my decades on the bench and on television. I'd dealt with entitled people, manipulative people, and delusional people. But something about Barbara Henderson's case triggered my investigative instincts. The lawsuit itself was absurd on its face. No court would ever recognize a parent's legal right to control their grandchild's name. But the psychology behind it, the sheer audacity and entitlement required to file such a suit, suggested something much deeper and more troubling. So, I did my homework. And what I discovered would not only destroy Barbara's lawsuit, but expose her as someone far more toxic than a simple, entitled grandmother. Barbara Henderson walked into my courtroom like she was entering a business meeting she fully expected to dominate and control. Her posture radiated confidence, her expression showed no hint of shame or self-doubt, and her entire demeanor communicated that she was the victim in this situation. She carried an expensive leather portfolio filled with what she considered ironclad evidence of her daughter's ingratitude. She had printed out bank statements showing every dollar she had ever spent on Jennifer from birth through college. She had created spreadsheets calculating the total cost of raising her daughter, arriving at the figure of $284,000. In Barbara's mind, this wasn't a lawsuit about a baby's name. This was about collecting on an investment that had failed to produce the expected returns. Barbara's entire life had been built on the foundation of control. At 58 years old, she had perfected the art of manipulating every relationship and situation to serve her needs and desires. She had been married 3 times. and each marriage had ended in divorce with restraining orders and accusations of harassment. Her own siblings had distanced themselves from her years ago, unable to tolerate her constant demands and her inability to respect boundaries. Her neighbors avoided her after years of complaints about noise, property lines, and perceived slights. Even her book club had quietly asked her to leave after she insisted on choosing every single selection and belittled anyone who disagreed with her opinions. But Barbara never saw herself as the problem. In her worldview, she was simply a woman with high standards, surrounded by people who were too weak, too sensitive, and too ungrateful to appreciate her strength and leadership. Jennifer had grown up under Barbara's suffocating control, and every major decision in her life had been influenced or outright dictated by her mother. When Jennifer wanted to study art in college, Barbara had refused to pay tuition unless she chose business administration. When Jennifer dated a kind, creative man in her early 20s, Barbara had sabotaged the relationship by constantly criticizing him and creating family drama until Jennifer ended things just to keep the peace. When Jennifer got engaged to her current husband, David, Barbara had tried to take over the entire wedding planning process, showing up uninvited to venue tours and attempting to change everything from the flowers to the menu to the guest list. Jennifer had learned early in life that disagreeing with her mother meant facing emotional punishment, withdrawal of love, and campaigns to turn other family members against her. The pregnancy had initially seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start in their relationship. Jennifer had hoped that becoming a grandmother would soften Barbara's edges and help her focus on something positive and joyful rather than on controlling every aspect of Jennifer's choices. For the first few weeks after announcing the pregnancy, Barbara had seemed excited and supportive. She had offered to help with nursery shopping and baby shower planning. She had called regularly to check on Jennifer's health and well-being, but underneath that surface support, Barbara was already making assumptions and plans that had nothing to do with what Jennifer actually wanted or needed. Barbara had decided within days of learning about the pregnancy that this baby would be named after her. She never asked Jennifer if this was something she wanted. She never had a conversation about family naming traditions or what might be meaningful to both generations. She simply announced to her social circle that Barbara Rose Henderson Jr. was on the way, and she began shopping accordingly. The personalized baby items arrived at Barbara's house, not Jennifer's, because Barbara had also decided that she would be the primary caregiver. In her mind, Jennifer would return to work full-time immediately after giving birth, and Barbara would essentially raise this child as a second chance at motherhood, this time with a baby who would be properly grateful and properly named. When Jennifer tried to gently push back on some of these assumptions, suggesting that she planned to take maternity leave and handle most of the child care herself with her husband, Barbara's facade of support began to crack. She made comments about Jennifer being overprotective and suggested that new mothers don't really know what they're doing. She implied that Jennifer's decision to breastfeed was inconvenient and unnecessary. She showed up at Jennifer and David's home unannounced multiple times, using the key they had given her for emergencies to rearrange their nursery according to her preferences. When David gently asked her to call before visiting, Barbara accused him of trying to turn Jennifer against her own mother and keeping her away from her grandchild. The tension reached a breaking point when Jennifer went into labor 3 weeks early. Barbara had demanded to be in the delivery room, despite Jennifer's explicit wishes that only David be present for the birth. When the hospital staff enforced Jennifer's wishes and refused to allow Barbara into the room, she caused such a scene in the waiting area that security was called. She screamed about her rights as a grandmother and accused the hospital of discrimination against family members. She sent Jennifer angry text messages during labor, berating her for being selfish and cruel. When Jennifer finally gave birth after 18 hours of difficult labor, Barbara refused to be among the first visitors. She stayed away from the hospital entirely, punishing her daughter for not giving her the access and control she demanded. The name announcement came 2 days after Emma's birth. Jennifer and David had carefully chosen the name Emma Grace, honoring David's late sister and creating something meaningful for their family. When Jennifer called her mother to share the news, hoping that the joy of finally meeting her granddaughter would override any disappointment about the name choice, Barbara's response was immediate and vicious. She told Jennifer that she had ruined everything. She said that this baby would be cursed with a meaningless name, chosen by people who didn't understand family loyalty. She claimed that Jennifer had publicly humiliated her by denying her the honor she deserved. and then she hung up the phone and refused to answer any of Jennifer's subsequent calls for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, Barbara launched a campaign of harassment that would eventually provide the evidence Jennifer needed to fight back in court. She sent text messages at all hours of the day and night, many of them angry and accusatory, others attempting manipulation through guilt and fake remorse. She emailed Jennifer's extended family members with long letters about how hurt and betrayed she felt, painting herself as a devoted mother who had been rejected by an ungrateful daughter. She told people that Jennifer was suffering from severe postpartum depression and making irrational decisions. She suggested that the baby was in danger because Jennifer was too mentally unstable to be a good mother. She even called Child Protective Services with a false report, claiming that Jennifer and David were neglecting the baby, which resulted in a traumatic home visit and investigation that ultimately found no evidence of any wrongdoing. I had reviewed every piece of evidence before the trial began, and my expression as Barbara took the stand revealed nothing of the storm that was building. I allowed Barbara to speak first, giving her just enough rope to hang herself with her own words and attitude. Barbara began her testimony with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she had been wronged, and that any reasonable person would see things from her perspective. She described her relationship with Jennifer as loving and supportive, conveniently omitting the decades of control and manipulation that had characterized their interactions. She painted herself as a devoted mother who had sacrificed everything to give her daughter the best possible life, and now that daughter had repaid that devotion with the cruelest possible rejection. Barbara pulled out her carefully prepared documentation, the spreadsheets and bank statements that itemized every expense associated with raising Jennifer. She walked me through the numbers with the precision of an accountant presenting a business case. Private school tuition, orthodontic work, dance lessons, summer camps, college expenses, and even the cost of food, clothing, and shelter for 18 years. She had calculated it all down to the dollar, arriving at her figure of $284,000. In Barbara's mind, this wasn't just a record of parenting expenses. This was evidence of an investment that entitled her to certain returns, certain considerations, certain rights over her daughter's choices. She genuinely believed that spending money on a child created a debt that must be repaid through obedience and compliance. I listened without interruption, my face impassive, occasionally making notes, but offering no reaction to Barbara's presentation. When Barbara finished her financial review, she moved on to the emotional arguments. She described the pain and humiliation she felt when Jennifer announced the baby's name. She talked about how she had already told everyone in her social circle that the baby would be named after her, and how embarrassing it was to have to explain that her daughter had chosen a different name. She claimed that this public humiliation had caused her severe emotional distress, resulting in sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, and damage to her reputation in the community. She painted Jennifer as selfish, thoughtless, and deliberately cruel, someone who had chosen to hurt her mother for no reason other than spite and rebellion. The courtroom audience watched this performance with growing discomfort and disbelief. Barbara's complete lack of self-awareness was stunning. She seemed genuinely unable to comprehend that her demands were unreasonable, or that her behavior might be perceived as controlling rather than loving. She spoke about Jennifer as if she were property rather than a person, an extension of herself rather than an independent adult with her own thoughts, feelings, and rights. Every sentence revealed more about Barbara's distorted view of relationships, family, and love. She used the word respect constantly, but what she actually meant was obedience. She talked about family loyalty, but what she demanded was complete submission to her will. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, but carrying an edge that regular viewers recognized as dangerous. I asked Barbara a series of seemingly simple questions, each one designed to expose the flaws in her thinking and the toxicity in her behavior. Did Jennifer ever sign any contract or agreement promising to name her child after Barbara? Barbara admitted she had not, but insisted that such things should be understood within families without needing to be written down. Had Barbara consulted Jennifer before spending $2,000 on personalized items with her own name embroidered on them? Barbara said she hadn't needed to consult anyone because she knew